right, everybody. Uh, Hope everyone is doing well. Apologies, I'm in sort of a new space. I am recording from back home in North Carolina, where I'm from, at my parents' place, because it is spring break. So if you hear any, traffic noise or anything like that, I'll do my best to talk over it. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different things, but we're going to start off with a type of paper that I haven't covered yet. And what this is a summary and response paper. So I think in an earlier video, we may have talked about summary and ways that you can summarize. If not, once we're done recording this video, I'll make a video about how to properly summarize something. But for right now, what we're going to talk about is this type of paper that you may be asked to do. It's not entirely dissimilar from rhetorical analysis of an academic article or like a peer review or something like that. But essentially what it's asking you to do is to look at something or read something, usually academic, although sometimes it could be a short story, a poem, a book, something like that, even a movie. I've done YouTube videos before, so it almost could be anything, but in the past, it's traditionally been an academic article of some kind. So usually this isn't the end project. It's something you do to kind of evaluate your sources and to try and figure out what it is that is valuable potentially about something. So with summary and response, it's usually somewhere along the lines of 50% summary and 50% response. Sometimes it's 2/3 summary and 1/3 response, or vice versa. It depends on the teacher that you have. So for this one, the one that I've been coming across with a student who's been coming in for tutoring, it seems like it's about 2/3 summary and about 1/3 response. So it breaks down into basically those two parts, summary and response. So summary, if you're taking a look at something sort of like an academic article, not a scientific article or a case study or lab report or some type of scientific journal entry or something, but if you're looking more for sources for a English paper or a history paper or a sociology paper or something like that, what you're looking for is you're trying to look for your thesis, the person's thesis statement, main ideas, primary points that they're trying to make. If it's a more scientific article, you're looking for what their hypothesis is. So in the beginning of a case study, in the beginning of a lab report, they'll tell you what they thought was going to happen or what their prediction was before they started the experiment. And then their results will speak to what actually happened. So you'll get an answer kind of to, was their hypothesis right? Was it on the right track? Was it maybe completely wrong, or they got some things right, or whatever it might be. So this is usually going to appear really early on. The results section should be, other than maybe acknowledgments where they're thanking people for time, money, contribution, that kind of thing, the results section is usually going to be later in the paper. So the reason why you're looking for these two things is because while the method is important. It's very important to understand what statistics they collected, how did they collect them, how did they design the experiment. All of those things are important. But at the end of the day, what you're most interested in is what was your prediction and what were your results. So the hypothesis and the results. Okay, so if you're working with a non-scientific article, then you're going to find a lot of this information in your introduction, especially the thesis statement and perhaps the main idea of the paper. So the thesis statement is not always, especially if you're reading peer review type articles, or papers where you're looking at your own classmates' work, or you're looking at somebody who's kind of new to the field. I know that when I'm teaching history and English, I ask for their thesis statement to actually be the final thing that, in fact, they are able to put into their introductory paragraph. That way, it stays with you. You know what their main point is. It's not difficult to locate. Whereas the main idea is generally something that is probably not going to be in your lead-in, your hook, your teaser, if you want to call it that first sentence. But it becomes readily apparent after that first sentence, oh, they're talking about Charles Dickens, or, oh, they're talking about the American Civil War, or they're talking about the first President Bush, or they're talking about how, Louisiana was populated in the 1700s or something like that. So it's more just the what is this paper about in a general sense. Your primary points are actually going to be found in your main idea sentences, and these are in the individual body paragraphs. So each body paragraph should have some sentence within it. Again, I like it to be the first sentence. That way your reader knows exactly what this paragraph is about, but it can be in the middle, it can be at the end of the paragraph, but everything within that paragraph should relate back to that main idea sentence or the primary point of that paragraph. So let's say that I'm writing a paragraph about, let's say that I was writing something about the history of Louisiana. So let's say I had a paragraph where I needed to talk about the Spanish influence on Louisiana. So I might talk about how powerful and influential the Spanish Navy was, how they patrolled the waters, how they were already somewhat close to Louisiana because they had the colony in Florida. I might also talk about the fact that unlike France, they were still enslaving Africans from the continent and bringing them over to the New World, whereas the French did not do that. But whatever it is, everything in that sentence, every detail should point back to that main idea sentence. So if my main idea sentence is talking about Spain, and somewhere within that paragraph you have something about Italy, or you have something about France, or you have something about America or England or whatever, then it needs to not be there, because that paragraph needs to be strictly about what that primary point was. And your main idea sentence said that was Spain. So it only needs to be about Spain. And in the next paragraph, maybe it's the native population. What were the first people of Louisiana doing when the French trappers and the Spanish Navy came? And then there would be one on the French, and then there would be one on the Americans potentially. So, but each one of those paragraphs should have a main idea sentence about one of your primary points that specifically says this paragraph is going to be about blank. All right, so that's a great way to know what it is that you're trying to summarize. So with the thesis statement, the main ideas, the primary points, those are going to be the things you look to mention in your summary. So that, because they're the most important things that this person was talking about. To somebody who would be reading this paper, those are the things that would be the most important to them. So look for them in individual body paragraphs and in the introduction and the conclusion. If you're looking at a scientific paper and you're looking for the hypothesis and the results, then you're going to want to look for the summary, or sometimes called hypothesis section, which is at the very beginning, and the outcomes section, which usually comes at the very end. And again, sometimes outcomes will be called results and vice versa. It just depends, pardon me, on the discipline that you're talking about. So biology might be different than chemistry, nursing might be different than psychology. It just depends. But usually the beginning and the end of the papers are great places to look for the most important information that you're going to need to summarize, because the idea behind a summary is not for it to be anywhere near as long as the original. You actually want it to, in fact, be significantly shorter. The whole point of summarizing is to make it more easily digestible for your readers. So you're saving them the trouble of having to read a 5 to 15 page paper when you write a 2 to 3 page paper. That's the whole point. So don't go crazy with the summarization, because most of the time people are looking for something that's easy to consume, that is understandable, so don't use a lot of heavy jargon without explaining what it is. For example, for my dad growing up in the medical field, or I grew up with him being in the medical field. For me, if I want pain relief for a headache or something like that, I'm going to talk about Tylenol or Advil or things like that. Or I'm going to say that, I don't know, pulled my shoulder muscle or something like that. My father is going to talk about scientific names for things like medicine and parts of the body and things like that. So, you aren't speaking in a summarization and response page to somebody who is an expert necessarily in this field. So if you do have to use language that the ordinary everyday person wouldn't understand, like, if your mom, your grandma, your dad, your grandpa, your uncle, cousin, whatever, wouldn't understand the language that you're using in your paper, then you probably need to go back and add some context or define some words that are in there for them, because otherwise it's just sort of it just doesn't read very well as something that is meant to be understood by a wider population. If people want the jargon, if they want the academic language and everything like that, they don't have to read your summary. They can go to the actual document. All right, when it comes to the response, this is usually a shorter portion of the paper, because your ability to summarize is really what the goal is for most of these. But then you use the response to show your level of understanding that you have about whatever the topic might be. So my advice for this is keep your reactions academic, but explore in a personal way. So it shouldn't be, I didn't agree with this, or I don't agree with this, or, because I was raised this way, or because I do this to me is not valuable, or you're not really there to put a value judgment on it. What you should be responding to are some of the things that we talked about up here. I mean, if you don't think that the person made a particularly strong argument, then by all means feel free to say that in language that wouldn't be considered derogatory, so you're not trying to attack the person that did this. And whether you liked it or not is not really the point of a response here. Now, if they have, I doubt you would ever come across this, but if they just have misspelled words and they don't finish sentences and the organization's terrible, if it impedes or keeps you from understanding it, then that's one thing that you could mention. But ideally, you should be responding to this as, I didn't realize this. Or, for example, the student that I was referencing earlier talked with me yesterday and had been reading a scientific article about the use of certain hallucinogenic drug treatments that are used, starting to be evaluated in the medical community as treatment for depression and for suicidal ideations and things like that. So you can have an opinion on whether something that is recreationally illegal should be used in medicine. But you are not making a judgment call for the entire world on which drugs should and should not be used, researched, legalized, whatever. That's not the point of this. What you may say is, that's really interesting that something that is vilified by, say, the Drug Enforcement Agency and is illegal in most places in this country is being used for medical benefits. I mean, or you could make the comparison for the fact that cocaine is illegal in every place in the United States. It's not like marijuana or certain other kinds of freer zones where people are able to use drugs in safe environments without fear of prosecution or something like that. That generally doesn't fall into that category. But despite it being illegal everywhere, it is in just about every hospital emergency room that you will come across in this country and in a lot of places around the world, because it's extremely good and at stopping bleeding, especially nosebleeds and things like that. Now, not somebody who partakes in it, not somebody who's a medical expert. I don't know the science behind how that works, but I do know that much like there is medical marijuana, there is medical cocaine, there are medical alcohol tinctures, mixtures, that kind of thing. It's not like you get prescribed a martini or something like that, but hospitals have to keep certain things just in case, and those are certain things that are just in case. So by using magic mushrooms, as some people call them, or psilocybin, the scientific name, you sometimes are able to reduce or severely limit the depressive feelings that are often associated with people suffering, from mental illness or suicidal ideations or things like that. And so this particular study actually found, among a very small group of people, that all of them reported a reduction in depressive episodes based on being given 2 very small samples of this hallucinogenic illegal drug, which was not illegal to give them as a medication. So you might have a reaction to questioning whether it's morally right to take something that we consider to be an illegal drug and apply it to medicine. I mean, for me, that's not as much of an issue, but I could understand for a lot of people that it could be. So it's okay to discuss things to react in that way, but just saying all drugs are bad and anybody who uses them should be in prison is not a relevant reaction to this kind of study, this kind of paper that you're trying to construct. You might also look at who the authors or the participating researchers were and discuss, if there is some positive or some negative about the fact that, maybe they're associated with a really good school, or maybe they're doing this seemingly cutting edge work or something like that, and they're at a facility that you weren't aware had access to this kind of technology or something like that, and so you could bring that up. But you want to keep your reactions academic, so keep it to the paper. That doesn't mean you can't react to personal things, but do it in that voice, with that tone. So it's not about your personal moral feelings most of the time. It's, what did you think of how they went about this? You could also say that I thought it was too, jargon heavy. I thought there were too many large words in it that were difficult to understand. And so I had to read it 3 or 4 times to get the meaning, or I had to go and read it with someone else, with one of my classmates or something like that. So there are lots and lots of ways to react to this in both a professional and a personal way, but try and keep your reactions to, looking at the thesis statement, the main ideas, the primary points, or the hypothesis and the results. Keep it to the actual material that you're evaluating, as opposed to trying to go off script and make it, and I don't mean this in a mean way, make it about you. Make it about the paper and not about necessarily your notions about what something should or shouldn't be. Okay? All right. So again, like I said, I'll take a look. I think I did a summary video. If not, I will record one after this to just give you a little bit more detail with that. And I'm also, since we're going to be going into exam season very soon, I'm going to do a couple of episodes where we talk about ways to approach certain kinds of exams, and some prep work that you can do, as well as things to look for, and successful strategies you can use to hopefully impress your teachers and really showcase how much you've learned. All right, everyone, have a great day.